1. I turned 18 and I got my driver's license over 8 months ago. And I've been driving a car for almost a year because my parents got a driving teacher's permit or something like that. It's basically like a driver's permit. So for my first driving ever, my dad went and bought me my own car, which was a 2013 Skoda Fabia, 1.2 TSI hatchback, and I loved it. Like, I didn't care that it wasn't some BMW or Audi, like seriously, they are expensive. But when I got my license, my friend, Peter, was like, "Why don't you get a better car? This shit will break the very second you drive it out of your driveway." "What do you mean? It's better than nothing, and it still has many kilometers ahead, and that's the only thing that I want from my car." "Yeah, but you'll trade this for something better when you've driven this a month, right?" "No." "WTF, man, why not? This isn't even a good make or model." "Okay, you have your opinions. Also, I'm not trading or selling this for at least a year or two." "Whatever, man. Don't come crying to me when you need someone to come fix your car because it broke down." So fast forward a couple months of me driving my friends and Peter around. And when Peter finally got his license after failing the driving test twice, he bought a 1989 BMW 525i with a 2.5-liter petrol engine, which wasn't registered due to being rejected in inspection the time he bought it, but he still paid over €2,000 for it. And when he got home, he called the whole group to come see his new car, and the first time I saw it I laughed, and he flipped when he saw me laughing and sad. "What's so funny, huh?" "Seriously?" "What is it?" "Who did your dad agree to buy that?" "What do you mean? I bought this myself." Context: he is so irresponsible with money that when he got money, he immediately used every penny and was constantly asking others for theirs. "Yeah, no." "Yes, I did." "Okay, chill. No need to get defensive about it. It's cool if your parents bought it for you. My parents did the same for my car." He mumbled something, but I didn't hear, so he showed off his car while making fun of mine and a couple of my friends because his car was the real driving machine that lasts forever. My friends had like a Nissan X-Trail, Nissan Qashqai, Volvo S50. So after a while, we were like, "Cool bro, now let's go for a drive." Everyone else was like, "Sure," even me, but Peter said, I'm not coming yet with my car. I need to get new wheels and shit for it." "What?" "Yeah, I don't want to drive it right now, because it's ugly." My other friend said, "Come on, bro, you've been talking shit all the time when you didn't have a license. But when you do, you're gonna be driving for days and nights, and now you do. You won't?" "Well, my car isn't registered, so I can't really drive around the streets." We go for a little drive, then we just go home. Fast forward again a month back. Peter finally passed the inspection of his car and was hyped. But just yesterday, while I was at work, he called to see if I could pick him up, because there was something up with his car. I told him no, since I still had a couple of hours of work left, but it was blazing hot that day and he was in the middle of nowhere, so I asked my supervisor if I could take the rest of the day off. Luckily for him, I got that and I went to pick him up. Turns out his car busted the oil pan and it didn't look good for it. "Shut up, I know what you're gonna say." "Just hop in. I don't want to be out here all day." "Thanks, man. Just don't tell the others that my car broke down." "I mean, you're going to have to eventually tell them." "No, I do not. You know that I didn't have to call you to come pick me up." "You know that I didn't have to come pick you up, but I still did." "Whatever." A couple of minutes go by, and I start asking him what he'll do about his car. "I don't know, probably sell it or trade it for something better." Don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think you can get any more than a couple €100 for it in that state. "Shut up. It's still worth more than this piece of shit." "Mine hasn't busted the whole oil pan, just saying." "Yeah, maybe that's because your daddy bought this brand new car for you. And how much did it cost? 10, 12,000? It was a little over €5,000, which was a great price for it. But it didn't have any type of luxury things that even older cars have, like automatic air conditioning. It has a manual one, yes. Cruise control, automatic transmission, or engine heater for winter times. So it's a pretty bare-bones car, but I don't really need any of them to drive. I tell him this, and he wasn't having it. He started yelling at me like a big baby that I was a spoiled brat. He even grabbed the wheel and tried to make me crash, but I managed to stop the car before he drove us off the road. At that point, I told him to get out of my car. He did, but after a couple hours, I got a knock on my door, and it was my other friend, asking what actually happened. Because Peter told many things, but none of them seemed real. I told him everything, and even said that Peter is really stupid and a big baby. I haven't talked to him afterwards, because, well, it happened yesterday, and he hasn't reached out. If he does, and it's something good, I might make a part 2. Probably not. But anyways, thanks for listening. 2. First, a little backstory. I work in the custom framing business, a pretty expensive field, so as you can imagine, it draws out the worst in people. From people who didn't know that a custom frame costs at least hundreds of dollars, to people who know and just want to make it my problem anyways. I've seen it all. This story takes place at a workplace I've since left, thank God for that. A major craft store chain in the US and Canada. We'll call it Pikel Thompson's for the story. I work in the back of the custom framing counter. Since frames are so expensive, people are always trying to find a way to get a discount because it took too long, or I don't like the work, or whatever lie they come up with. Look, I totally get it. I work as a framer and I can't even afford to buy a custom frame. I sympathize, but I don't make the prices. We still have the very best prices of any place, and there are other cheaper options for your artwork if you're broke like me. This particular customer I'll call Karen because she is one, and also because I forgot her name. She had some unique frame that I hadn't heard before, like Tabitha or something. She didn't seem like she was going to be any trouble at first. Actually, I really liked her when I first met her. She seemed very friendly, and she was a lot less pushy than most. She also didn't complain about the price, which is very rare. She put in an order for 2 pieces. One was a set of 4 hand-sewn antique rugs that her grandmother had sewn, and the other was for a birth certificate. But it wasn't a normal birth certificate. It was hand-drawn with little fish and octopus on it. Not like any birth certificate I had seen before. Now the rugs were already framed and sewn down onto the mat, and she wanted to replace the frame and the old mat with a new one. When we take an order like this, we always ask if they want to keep the old material and have it returned after we take it out. Sometimes the frame is sentimental, or they just want to save it to use for something else. People can get pretty upset if you throw out something they wanted to keep. She was very vocal about, "Yes, please throw out the old thing. It's so old and ugly." So, I of course toss out the old frame and mat for the rugs, and then store the art to be framed in a few weeks. This is where problem 1 begins. Our store has a 2-week turnaround time on custom frame jobs. It's always 2 weeks unless they pay for expedited shipping and handling, which she of course didn't. The frame and mat get sent to us from a distribution center in Texas, and our store is in California. So the components we need to put the frame together don't even show up until a few days before the order is due. About a week after the order was placed, my framing manager, Daria, gets a call from Karen. Karen says that I told her it would be ready in a week and that she is going to come pick it up today. Daria tells Karen that no, it is not ready and won't be for another week. And right on cue, Karen flips her shit. "You told me this is the most unprofessional thing. You will do it for me today." Blah, blah, blah. My manager knows I would never tell anyone it would be done in a week if they didn't pay for expedited shipping. Why would I? Karen pulls some bullshit lie about how she has a memorial or something, so she needs it, but she definitely didn't mention before. I'm there next to my manager while she's on the phone with this horrid lady, letting her know that she's full of it as she's screaming about this. So Karen calms down real fast, almost too fast for comfort. She says, "Okay, well then just give it back to me in the old frame with the old mat." Which of course we do not have since she told me to get rid of it. Blow-up number 2 comes hurtling out of her mouth. "I never said that. That was my grandma's frame. It is irreplaceable. How could you? There's nothing you can do to make this up to me." And I can hear her screaming, even though my ear was far away from the phone. So after a few more minutes of Karen screaming about this priceless heirloom frame, it was clearly a cheap frame, she asks, "How are you going to fix this?" Standard protocol when something bad happens is to give them a refund of their money and do the work for free. She begrudgingly accepts and hangs up. She calls back about 10 minutes later, calm as a cucumber, to apologize. "Oh, I know it wasn't your fault. You're doing the best you can, and it was just a misunderstanding." At the time, I thought it was a little weird because people don't just calm down that fast after you throw out a family heirloom. I mean, she literally sounded like nothing had happened at all. But I just brushed it off for the time being. Now, if she had stopped there, it wouldn't have been as big of a thing. But of course, she was just getting started. The day finally comes when it's time to put her pieces together, and I do it. No problems, and the rugs actually turn out really great as well. One of my favorite jobs I had done, and I was sure she was gonna love it. I call her, and she comes to get her pieces the next day. I refund her money, and she's just overjoyed at how well they turned out. We always unwrap the art to show to every customer, so we make sure they love it before taking it, and she loved it. About an hour later, I receive a call. I answer, and, "Oh, P, you damaged my art, my one-of-a-kind hand-painted birth certificate. I cannot get another one. They don't just print these blah, blah, blah." Oh, the hell with this woman. Now I'm starting to panic at this point. I know I didn't damage it. But I thought maybe it got a bend when it was put away, or something small maybe could have happened. Small mistakes like that happen every once in a while, especially in a really high-volume store like ours. So I ask her how it was damaged, and she says 2 whole letters were missing off her name. Now, there's a couple of things to consider here. The name on the certificate was drawn in ink in big block letters. Ink does not just rub off. It's soaked into the paper. Even if it was its pastel or pencil, it wouldn't rub off. It would smudge. But it was really old, so at the time, in my panicked state, I thought maybe something could have happened somehow. The other thing was, if the letters are so big, how was it that she didn't notice this when she picked it up? Not to mention, I would have definitely noticed if I rubbed off 2 massive letters when I was doing the job. Framing is a precision craft, and we work for really delicate, valuable stuff all the time. So you always have to be very careful. I'm not in the habit of manhandling customers' art, especially when I knew it was very old and very fragile. The letters were already almost gone when she brought it in, due to wear and tear over the years. But I had no proof that it was like that before. We're supposed to take a picture of the art when we take the order, but our cameras were down that day, and she had seemed so nice at the time that I didn't bother, because I thought she'd be chill. If I had only taken a picture, I could have shut her down quick. I start to get worried, mind racing, thinking maybe it was rubbed off in the storage sleeve or something. So I stutter and try to explain that I'm pretty sure I would have noticed, but she's not having it. I hate confrontation, I just don't handle it well. My mind goes into panic mode and my brain shuts off, and I can't talk very well or judge situations. So I try my best to talk her down and get her off the phone by explaining that there is such a thing as art restoration places, and they will almost certainly be able to fix it for her. She chills out and hangs up, and then they call back 10 minutes later, cool as a cucumber once again, and give me the same speech as last time. "Oh, I know it wasn't your fault, OP. You're doing your best, and I'm sure it just happened on accident." Again, she seems too cheery. I start to wonder a little more about this. I call every art restoration and conservation place I can find on Google for the next couple hours of my shift, and come up with a list of places that might be able to fix this absolute shit show. I ring her back and give the list to her, and that was that for a while. Something this big goes straight up to corporate. Damaging art is a big deal, a serious no-no. So naturally I get a call from corporate later that day. They start asking about the whole situation, and I express my concerns about this customer. Like I said previously, people will try and scam their way into a free frame. Pretty often, actually. I told corporate there was a lot about her story that didn't add up, telling me to throw out the old frame and then going back on it and claiming it was valuable when it was not. The whole thing about how the letters being rubbed off didn't make sense, and about her bouncing between mad AF and totally cheery suspiciously fast. They thank me and let me go, and I just go back to work. These kind of claims take a while to work themselves out. Basically, she was told to get her birth certificate restored and then give us a receipt, and we would reimburse her for it. I don't think she even got it fixed for months. She certainly wasn't in a hurry. And she never brought the certificate back to have us put it in the frame after she got it restored. What I do know is how much we forked over to her for it to be restored, something like $2,500 for the restoration. And if you include the price of the free frames she got, she took us for a little over $3,000. For all I know, she just bullshitted that price and corporate gave it to her to not cause drama. Our company has a tendency to just cave to angry customers really fast. It just makes our lives easier and is not my money, so I don't usually care. This story doesn't end there, though. It turns out that corporate actually started doing some digging on her, and what they uncovered was very interesting. It turns out that she has a reputation at every single pickle store in that area. The 4 closest stores all knew her by name, and they all had a similar story. She would bring something to get it framed, find a problem with the art, throw a temper tantrum, and walk out with a free damn frame. 4 times she did this. It still makes me mad to think about it. Sadly, this isn't a story with some epic ending where she got dragged off to jail for something like some of the other stories I've read. But she did sort of get hers. See, she had pushed her luck a little far this time with her whole $2,500 restoration job stunt. Once corporate found out she had a record of getting free frames from all different stores, she was blacklisted and is no longer able to get stuff framed at Pickles. Usually, when someone gets a free frame for some sort of mix-up, it's not that big of a deal, and it doesn't reach the higher-ups in corporate. So if she hadn't gotten greedy, she probably would have just kept going to new stores and pulled the same shit at least a few more times. I'll tell one thing, though. I'm sure glad I wasn't the one who had to tell her she was banned. It's been a while now since this all went down, and I've cooled off about it. I've had a new job at a high-end frame shop for 8 months, and the Karens have almost all faded away. I think maybe customers who come to a serious frame shop have more respect for the craft and trust that we know what we're doing. Something about overly bright fluorescent lights, craft bargains, buy one get one sales, coupons, long lines, and short staff turns people into monsters. Everyone who's worked retail knows this. 3. This takes place back in 2017 when I was a senior in high school. From preschool to my freshman year, I was in public schooling. After years of getting bullied and finding a private Catholic high school close to where my mom worked, I begged her to let me transfer. I then attended that school for my sophomore to senior year, when this story is taking place. It's important to note that I am not and have never been Catholic. However, the school advertised being open to all regardless of personal religious beliefs. I was raised Baptist but was falling away from organized religion at this point. This isn't very important. All seniors were required to attend a 2-day overnight retreat. All seniors went to a religious campsite and participated in bonding and religious activities. Students were asked to give our medication to our assigned counselors to be handed out as needed. At this point in time, I was on a variety of medication for my mental health, as well as birth control due to an unusually long period I had that lasted 3+ weeks. This was concerning because around the same time I was having an unusual cycle, my mom was hospitalized due to having a period that lasted longer than a month. This hospitalization required her to receive a blood transfusion. Catholic schools typically have a very strong stance on birth control. My school was no different. They preached how birth control was no better to abortions, and that it wasn't needed regardless of circumstance. Abstinence, blah blah blah, whatever. This is the reason I decided not to hand my medication over to my counselor, and instead I hid it in between some clothes in my bag. Seniors leave for the retreat after lunch, which means we have classes as normal until then. I was in one of my classes talking with a few of my friends who were also going on the retreat. I'm not sure how, but the topic of control was brought up, and one of my friends mentioned how she left hers at home, because she didn't want any of the drama of giving it to the counselors and hearing the lectures she heard about from previous seniors. I told her that it was ridiculous that our school made students feel intimidated enough not to bring our medications, and that I had hid mine in my luggage to avoid persecution. I must admit, I probably should have been paying more attention to my tone of voice in relation to my teacher's desk, because the next period I was pulled out of class and into EO office. "You know why I called you in here, Hypne?" I had a really fun time arguing with authority figures back then, so I probably just shrugged nonchalantly. I know my response to this initial question was not important enough to stand out. "The teacher said she had overheard you saying you were bringing birth control on the retreat, that you weren't planning on reporting to your counselor." I mean, I'm 18, I think I should be able to give myself my own medications, but I get it. I'll give them to her before I go. "We already went through your things and found your medication and gave them to the counselor. You know birth control is bad for you and against Catholicism. You shouldn't be having sex before marriage anyway. Does your mom know you're sexually active? We're going to call your mom and let her know that you're taking birth control and you're sexually active." At this point, I think I was just more angry that he had the audacity. I didn't feel the need to explain to a man why I was on birth control for reasons that weren't sexual, so I told him to call her. My mom is more of a firecracker than I am, especially over me. That mixed with the fact that she was a part of the process of me getting the prescription for my birth control. I just knew that the call between EO and my mom would be better than anything I could have said. He continued berating me about my choice to have sex and how angry my mom was going to be once I called her. I just sat quietly until he told me to go back to class, and that he would call me back once he spoke to my mother. I always wonder how that talk went. I texted my mom after I got out of the office just to let her know since she would handle it, and I guess she did. The EO never really spoke to me again the rest of the school year, and I was never pulled back into his office the next day. The rest of the retreat was okay, except for the fact that I had to deal with an annoying, maybe entitled counselor who lectured me every night on the terrible things birth control was doing to my body, and how I didn't really need it before she would allow me to take it. She would really continuously ask me if I was sure I really wanted to take it before she would even hand it over to me. What could have been a 5-minute process max ended up turning into a 15 to 20-minute process, because my school thought they knew more than my doctors. I had even explained to her why I was prescribed it, and she still went on to lecture every night on more natural ways she had researched to heal my body, and that I didn't need birth control, and that I was hurting my potential for future children. 4. I've got to admit, my poor dad has told me numerous stories of my entitled aunt, Sarah, 50, not her real name, and I wanted to write these down because there are a few I want to remember before I forget. I'm a 21-year-old female, for the record. Here we go in chronological order. My entitled Aunt Sarah is the eldest of 3 kids. There's her, then my Aunt Tori, 47, and my dad. All players have their own kids. Sarah has 3 boys, that is important for later. Tori has 3 girls, my dad has a boy and a girl. The beginning. Sarah was deemed the brain of Britain growing up, always top of her class and never getting into bother at school. She willingly stayed until the last year of high school so she could get better grades to go to university. Mind you, this was in the 80s, and I don't really know if there was tuition covered in Scotland, but I doubt it. So Sarah declared that she would be taking a gap year to work to go to university the following year at 19. However, she met her future husband, Twatface, and he was from a decently well-off family. This is what my Aunt Tori declares is the start of her entitlement, since he told her she never had to work a day again if they got married. They didn't marry until 2 years later, but he gave her the life she wanted and felt she deserved better after her childhood of poverty and hiding from social workers. Fair to say, she never did apply for university at 19, or at any point after that. My grandfather, her father, was so angry with her because he felt she was wasting her future for a life of sitting about. Obviously, Sarah didn't care. Marriage and children. Yes, Twatface and Sarah did get married, and it was a lovely affair apparently. I didn't even know I wasn't born yet. Now, I should mention that my entitled aunt is incredibly religious, and this was brought on more by her marriage. She had to wait until she was married to have a child because the elders in the church will speak so badly if I had a child out of wedlock. Women, this was the 90s in Scotland. Well, in the mid-90s, Sarah announced she was expecting a baby boy with twat face, and the family went insane. This was the first grandchild. But then Tori also announced she was pregnant 2 weeks later and announced it was a baby girl. This set off Sarah because she developed a sick obsession with having a girl. Before the end of the 90s, Sarah had managed to have the firstborn and 2 boys. Tori managed to have 2 girls, and Nick had my elder brother. So 5 grandkids in total. After the millennium, my dad had announced that my mum was pregnant again, and so did Tori, which was unexpected. So just a few months apart, I was born in May, and my little cousin in September. Now you'll never guess what Sarah did. Got pregnant again. She was told at scans that she was having a girl. She was ecstatic. However, the doctor was beyond stupid, and my youngest cousin was a boy. She was so depressed and turned on her sister and brother, berated them for having children out of wedlock, and saying that they were going to hell and deserved to burn for rubbing it in her face that they managed to have girls. This actually caused no contact for a few months between my dad and Sarah. However, all this changed when we started to visit her.
Give me your daughter, she's my golden child.
Surprisingly, I do remember this, being like 4 years old. By this point, my parents were married, so the wedlock issue stopped. But Sarah had become quite possessive over me the last year. When I saw her, I had to stick by her side or stay within reach. I was lucky, and my 2 older cousins told her to do one, in young kid speech, so I could go play Pokemon and watch Power Rangers with them. On one visit, nearly at my 5th birthday, I was downstairs with my little cousin, and we were playing when my dad told me to get my shoes so we could get home for dinner. I remember looking up and seeing Sarah death glare my dad. Now, this is a 16-year-old memory mixed in with paraphrasing from my dad, but this is the exchange that happened.
Go home? I told you I wanted her to stay the night.
Sarah, I told you already. She's going to see Tori and the girls tomorrow.
You're prioritizing your nieces again. I told you, Nick. She's my golden child. Mine. She's going to stay here tonight so we can have a girls' night.
Sarah, oh my God, will you shut up about this? You never got a girl, get over it. She's my daughter, so if you don't shut up, I'll make sure you never see her again. Fair to say, I was able to go home with my dad, and I didn't really see my cousins for a few months. It was on and off visits until I was about 7, and then they moved up north for Twatface's job. Out of wedlock, bites Sarah in the ass. This has got to be a fan-favorite tale of mine, mainly because I was here to witness it. Now, my eldest cousin was 19 at the time. I was 13. I had seen him the previous week for a visit, and he told me that he's going to be announcing some really good news on a family group call. As soon as I joined the call, I was lambasted by Sarah for wearing a football top and told to change it. She hated that I was not the once innocent little girl she knew but a tomboy. However, that's for another day. Now I sat with my dad and my brother while my cousin joined the call with his girlfriend. We thought he was announcing an engagement. Nope. He and his girlfriend announced that they were pregnant and expecting a baby in November. I screamed in delight. My dad was proud. My brother was so pleased. My granddad already knew. Sarah and Twatface looked pale, about to faint and start screaming at him. Sarah demanded we leave the call, and we did. I was horrified at her reaction, but my dad told me not to worry. And this is how I was told the previous stories I have mentioned above. Sarah was seriously so entitled because she wanted everything her way. And the fact her eldest son was having a child before the age of 20 with his girlfriend of 9 months, and refused to get married set her off. He had to cut contact with his girl, from being 3 months pregnant to just before his daughter was born. You'd never believe now that Sarah is a doting grandmother to the now 6-year-old daughter of my cousin, after all she put her son through. I've actually yet to meet her in the flesh. I've only met her on video call, but that's just life when you're 200 miles apart. Bragging about your lifestyle at a wedding? Now, this is a more recent story. My dad attended his cousin's wedding about 4 years ago, and Sarah was actually invited. No idea who thought that was a good idea. To preface this story, I need to explain something. Do you remember how I said Sarah was promised to never work again when she married Twatface? Yeah, that backfired. He lost his high-paying job and was forced into a crappy office job for a few years. Because Sarah couldn't live her lifestyle, she had to get a job for the first time in 26 years, and was brought back down to earth, humbled greatly. Now, I wasn't at this wedding, but my dad informed me that Sarah was showing how entitled she was again. She sat with a cousin of theirs, my dad and my mum, and began to detail how they were going back home to go on a yacht. No, not their yacht, their friends. And not a yacht, but a decent-sized boat. This lasted 45 minutes, and the cousin had to walk away before telling her to F off and save this for a more appropriate occasion. To conclude, my dad hasn't actually seen Sarah in about 3 years. I never spoke for 10 years because my dad realized how one-sided their relationship was. He decided after she moved to not text her and see how long it would take her to text him. From when he did that, she hasn't ever once. Dad only speaks to my oldest cousin and doesn't bother with Sarah's other sons. My brother talks all 3 of them. I only talk to the eldest as well, as he's helping me with some uni stuff. Sarah will never change. She never thanked us for her 50th birthday posts or the present and card we sent up to her. She hates the fact that I'm the first granddaughter to go to university, and pushed one of her sons to be a teacher too. Screw you, Sarah. You just prioritize your own lifestyle than loving your nieces and nephew. 5. I went to a private high school in the southern United States. I had a few struggles while attending, but this one teacher stuck out the most. We'll call her Ms. Fowl. She was my biology teacher, and had already developed an opinion of me. A couple notes. I suffer from Asperger's syndrome, a form of high-functioning autism, so this probably had something to do with Ms. Fowl's perception of me. Also, most of my experiences in high school were positive, and I look back on them happily. But you'll hear from Ms. Fowl. A few examples of interactions I had with her are as follows. Firstly, the school would have Mass in the Commons every week. It was a Catholic school. One week I decided to stay behind and pick up chairs after Mass, as they request help each week, and I like to be helpful. This, however, means I was late back to class. I walked in and Ms. Fowl immediately asked for my tardy slip. A couple of classmates and I tried to explain I had been picking up chairs, but in the end I was forced to take the walk of shame to the front office. They were not happy and told me to return to class, calling her over the intercom to let her know the situation. Needless to say, I did not like being told I was a liar. Secondly, I mentioned I have Asperger's syndrome. Well, eventually we began to study genetic disorders. At this time, my mom was reading papers online to understand how autism works, specifically Asperger's syndrome. No, she's not anti-vax or anything like that. She was taught how to do proper online research. My mom found an interesting article pointing to a correlation between Asperger's syndrome and specific chromosomal abnormalities. So she thought maybe it would be cool to bring this to Ms. Fowl, correlate our studies with ongoing research and whatnot. So I brought the printouts to Ms. Fowl, told her what they were, and was brushed off. Not really that serious or even entitled, but still not exactly kind. Thirdly, and this is the reason she is referred to as Ms. Fowl, I had a habit of writing really heavily, meaning I would often break the tip off of my pencils. Ms. Fowl had a rule that during tests you couldn't use mechanical pencils or get up to sharpen your pencil. She had a very small basket of pencils people had forgotten at the front of the class. But they weren't in the best condition, and getting up and searching for a suitable pencil from the basket took time that was better suited to answering the test questions. All this to say that this was affecting my grades. As such, a PTC meeting was called. My parents met with my teacher and the principal, and they discussed why my grades were falling, and eventually the topic of pencils was brought up. My dad decided to try and compromise with Ms. Fowl and ask if I could have a supply of pencils on my desk with my case in case I break one, and she flat out said no. When asked why, her answer was,
It would give him an unfair advantage.
No joke. She said I would have an unfair advantage in test taking because test-taking is a competition, I guess. To be fair, it sort of was a competition in her class, because if you did well, you got your name put on the wall. But that was her decision, and her decision was affecting my grades. That's pretty much all I have in regards to Ms. Fowl. She eventually left the school after I graduated, but I can't remember if she was fired or left of her own accord. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 77. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do hit the like button and share the video around with friends and family. Alright, now before we go on, I think we have a couple of shoutouts to do today. Let's see, shoutout number 1 goes to the author of the final story there, the Ms. Fowl story, and that goes to Reddit user Someone With An Idea. Thank you very much, Someone With An Idea, for allowing us to use your story. Right, and I also think we have a little birthday shout-out to do. I think it's a 2 for 1, actually. Let's see. Alright, and today's shout-out goes to Kathy Beckford. And I don't know how old Kathy is, she doesn't say, but today's her birthday, and her dad's birthday was actually on, or will actually be on, the 14th of this month. He's sadly no longer with us, but it doesn't mean we can't honor him and celebrate his birthday. And as such, Kathy, I must insist that you celebrate your birthday for 2 whole months. 2 months of relaxation and good times on your dad's behalf. Okay, now before I go, I'd like to sing Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kathy. Dear John. Happy birthday to you. Alrighty then, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day, and then we'll wrap things up. And today's question is, given the choice, would you prefer more time in the day asleep or more time awake? I think personally, assuming I wouldn't be tired, I would enjoy a little more time awake most of the time. There are times when I'd definitely like to sleep longer. But yeah, by and large, I could probably get more done in the day. But do let me know what you think and leave your answers in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.